In part 1 we just scratched the topic about the reality in which we live. In this part 2, we will see what the bases of this theory are, how it is related with some existing ones, with old research as well as new findings. Also we will define the fundamentals of the processes that are happening inside this reality. So let's start. Making a theory is based on information from researches and experimental data. Conclusions made according to them generate mind analyses and virtual visualizations. How all of that fit in one smooth fluent system, according which possible nature works. Its accuracy depends on the researcher's personal opinion and conclusions that could not be totally correct. So the accuracy of the theory extremely depends from the researcher approach of the information. In reality, it could work well to some degree, but the basic processes behind the natural phenomena can be far from the truth. How nature does that? It could happen that we have couple of correct theory that work well beside they are made from different angle and different approach. The theory behind what will be presented here is based on 3 extremely huge works that are connected in one, with far-reaching conclusions. They are as follows. 1. The Ultimate Reality by Joseph Cater. 2. Dr. Yuri Ivanov's theory of rhythmodynamics. And 3. Occult chemistry and the work of C.W. Leadbeater and Annie Besant. The first one is the mainframe of it, which means that the approach which is explained in it is took as the base where the other 2 are incorporated in very logical and interesting way. Also it extremely well coincides with natural phenomena. As we said previously, this is another way to explain the secrets of nature, but here, the things are presented in a very different way than the contemporary science, which solve a lot of mysteries particularly in today's physics. Next step is to define the space or medium where we live. Under medium, I mean space where all processes are happening. If you go through the history of science, you will see that until beginning of 19th century, this medium was ether. After that, because of couple of experiments, which results were wrongly interpreted, something similar with what we said previously, that the conclusions of the experiments are highly dependable from the experimenter, it was banned, and replaced initially with emptiness, then vacuum, and recently with dark matter and Higgs field. It is strange how it was accepted that light goes through the vacuum just like that, without interacting with it. Later in this series, we will see that this is not the case at all, and that what we see as light is just a portion of huge stream of soft electrons or photons as we know them. When you want to build a world, you need a medium from which you will create it, and you need intelligent way to do this. Medium is a must, if we like to explain even the simplest form of natural processes. It has to take part in something, not just emptiness or some very exotic fields. It has to have its own structure and organization, way of responsive stimuli, movement and most importantly its dynamic. For that reason, this theory will accept the term ether as a all-filling medium in this reality. You need some kind of forces to control it, and processes that will keep it alive. Sand will be used, as a metaphorical way, to explain on a very simple and layman way, a great deal of the reality, and the universe where we live. We will then transfer it, to their real world. As we stated in the Part 1, we cannot go to the ultimate root of the answer, because there will be always additional question that will ask for the deeper answer, and we will be not in condition to do that. Due to this, we have to limit to the frame from where we can start, and that will be some real and obvious fact. Our starting point will be the energy that flow inside this reality or universe. 1. Very simple question, rise from above. What is energy, and where does it come from? We can answer on the first part of the question, but not on the second one. Energy is a frequency, a unique oscillation property that gives life inside the etheric field. Later it will be shown how it can be manipulated, so it can trigger flows, movements, and make the reality where we live, including making matter visible to our senses. Where does it come from, and who has put it inside the etheric field, is the question that we cannot answer, because it goes deeper inside something we do not know right now. It goes in people believing, who created the world, and it could be God, some intelligent force, or something that you believe or not. Whatever it is your right to see on it, as you feel or believe, but for all, the energy is real, and we can see it, feel it, and experience it in our everyday life. Total amount of energy inside the etheric field, not just inside our universe, we will assume that cannot be changed. Beside there is an open question with the creator of it, so we can continue with some solid base to develop the picture of the field, and we will say that it was created, and was put in it, without further outside interference. The energy can be transformed from one frequency level to the other, but the total value always stays the same. As we will see later, possibility for existing of countless worlds, realities, as ours, that reside in different frequent spaces in the same 3D space, is huge. One reality can receive energy from the other, and so on and so forth. This cascade transformation can be unlimited in depth. From the above, you can understand that our universe is not closed system, but very open, where the energy flow from many different frequent fields can come and go without limits. As we said, the energy is frequency or oscillation per seconds. This means how much oscillation some oscillator is making in 1 second. Another term, wavelength, is connected with the oscillations. This is the length between each oscillation, and both are inversely proportional, which means if frequency is high, the wavelength is small, or vice versa. In general, these values can be unlimited, and very interesting cases appear if we use an equation connecting these two parameters. In case the frequency goes to infinite, wavelength goes to 0, or vice versa. If wavelength goes to infinite, frequency goes to 0. These two border cases, geometrically can be represented by a very unique geometric body, called torus, or known between all of us, as a donut shape. This kind of donut has a very small, singular, hole in the middle. If we make a cross-section in the middle of it, we will have something that very well describes the above equation with its border cases, and much more, in which we will not go now. The point hole, when wavelength goes to 0, or frequency to infinity, is a singularity, and when the wavelength goes to infinity, or a frequency to zero, is something that we call all-existing. Quite intriguing case, that border with people's believing in all existing at once, or God. There is another question that is very important and needs to be reviewed before we continue. What is singularity? We know that it is infinitesimal small value, or when circle radius goes to zero. Going to zero is a questionable term, and near zero measures are quite undefined. That is why we need to define the singularity, and the most possible small thing that we can assume as the base one. Since this is very important thing for all further adventures in this series, we will take a close look of it. What could be the smallest property of the etheric field? As we did with the question and answer thing, we need to have the zero level size as something that has practical and already familiar relation. Later in this series, we will analyze the shape and the composition of the proton and the electron, and we will see that they have quite complex structure, and that the smallest part, from which they are created, will be the smallest and the ultimate base for all further developments. This is very important thing, that will define the way how etheric field, proton, and the electron, work and behave. We will call it the nu, pronounced as a nu, from the Sanskrit term for ultimate particle of matter. I guess we all know what sand looks like, and how it behaves when it is inside the airstream, by wind or artificially by using fans. Also, we all know that it is consists of many different kind of graduations of stones, big and small. Now, we will extend this look of the sand, with some additional possibilities. We will give them a unique property of penetrability, which means that they can pass through each other. This will help visualize processes that will give new light on the etheric field, and why it is the base for our reality, and maybe a countless other. Sand has different grain sizes. What is the smallest one? We cannot say for sure, so we have the same situation as with the singularity. If we have a proper milling machine, the size can go to unlimited depth, to the size of the ultimate particle of matter or a nu. So, the situation is quite similar with the real structure of the etheric field. To be realistic and practical, the smallest sand grain size, we will treat it as the size of what our eye can see, so we should have better understanding of what we are talking about. Now, that we have all defined, I will introduce the energy carriers phenomena. Imagine the following: you have a box of sand, or whatever form you would like, consists from different sizes of grains bigger and smaller, mixed together, with smallest grains mentioned above. These smallest grains will be the main medium through which the outside influence will be transferred to the bigger ones. We need to ignore the gravity, because in reality, as we will see later when we will talk about it and its nature, we will see that it is generating inside the etheric field. Now, if we start oscillating the box with some frequency, the grains will start oscillating too, but with different frequencies, smaller faster, and bigger slower. When the gravity is not present, there will be no segregation, and heavier will not go at the bottom of the box, but all will be mixed together. If the frequency which is related with the box is changing, the sand grains frequencies will be changing too. So, the outside frequencies influence the inner ones. This is very important moment. If outside frequency goes near infinity, our medium grains, the smallest ones, will start oscillating near the box frequency. If we just leave this frequency in infinity time, the main medium grains will stay with this frequency in infinity time too. Drop those, the bigger grains will oscillate too, but with different frequencies, smaller than the smallest ones. Besides, they are mixed inside the box. Every similar in size grain will oscillate with the same frequency, due to the geometric correlation with the resonance. Final picture will be the 3D layers, with the same or similar oscillations. During these oscillations, there will be countless collisions between the sand grains. The very similar in size or with very small size differences will influence each other the most. The ones with big size differences will influence each other in small fractions. Let us analyze what will happen if we use the penetrability properties that we said at the beginning of this part. What do you think? Yes, they can enter each other inside. Will they pass through or stay inside the passing grains, will depend from following. If the oscillations, frequencies, are not too big in value, and the moving speed relatively not so fast between two different sized grains, the smaller ones can be captured by the bigger ones. This means that the smaller ones will be hidden within the bigger ones. These bigger ones can be captured by bigger ones from them, and so on and so forth. Until when, we will see a bit later, when we will be talking about the real electric field. Any non-uniformity will case the most elementary, the smallest one, to form bigger ones, which will case different sizes within elementary ones. More about this later in this series. This way, the more energetic particles, grains, can be captured by the more inert and bigger ones, making possible the smaller ones to be carried from the bigger ones. This process is one of the biggest natural achievements, with far-reaching consequences. This way, the energy from one place can be transported to the other places, or inside spaces with different frequent space than the grains with smaller sizes, which otherwise cannot be achieved due to the frequent disharmony. With other words, you have bigger frequency to enter spaces with smaller ones, or a process of unlimited power or destruction depending how you will use it. If we now switch from sand grains, and transfer this to elementary particles or the other grains, NU, or quantum field grains, if you wish to call them, and apply what was said above, you will have phenomenon of energy carriers. Just to mention, as a side talk for now, different particles with different oscillations, that are far between each other, cannot interact and can pass through each other, open topic for multi-frequent dimensions, or even multi-universes. But let's leave this to talk later. Let's start the adventure inside the electric field. The above particles, that contain inside them smaller particles, we will call soft electrons, because they actually have electrons inside them, but are bigger and have different frequencies and speed. The particles that are embedded inside the soft electrons, we will call hard electrons or high-frequency particles. Penetration of the soft electrons inside the matter is much bigger than the harder ones, because the latest are related with higher ether. These particles are with very high oscillations that do not interact with matter, which is related with lower ether, the particles with lower oscillations. This means that the soft electrons will go deeper inside this material world than the hyperactive and smaller hard electrons, which give energy to the matter. It is a fantastic way of transport of energy through the universe. As we will see later in the following parts, water is the universal carrier of them. In the last section of this part, we will see about another phenomena that is also extremely important, and its full meaning will be discussed in the part for electrons, protons and atoms. Here, we will just start with the discussion. We already said that the smallest parts of the electric field we will call nu, and that they will be the building blocks of it. We will assume that they have the biggest frequency, and the particles created from them will have a slightly smaller one, but in our measures almost infinite. Now all of these particles will be colliding with the bigger ones directly or as a side effect of their rotations and movements. With other words, they will be like a fluid to them. Assuming this, in the following parts of this series, we will see that these particles are generators of static and magnetic fields, and as their direct consequence, interfering standing waves, which further will define the frequent spaces and the structure of matter.